mentioned earlier, it might have been before we started rolling the camera, the relevance of liberal studies, the arts, social and behavioral sciences.
Oh, well, I
and so
mean,
forth.
as an
So-
academic, you'd understand that.
Right.
What liberal arts brings to you is curiosity, examples from history. It really makes your right brain work. The left brain, part of the problem of chief executives have these days is their entire career, if you think about it, has been measured quantitatively. In college, marks. In business school, marks. Then they start a professional career in business and return on investment, profit margin, whatever it might be, it's all marks. Then they become a CEO. And then they find out, much to their horror or dismay, that they are also their performance is also being measured by non-measurable financial factors: integrity, trust, credibility. What is this stuff? They're very uncomfortable with it because everything they've done in the past has been concrete in one way or another. And now they're being, I mean, there have been CEOs who have been discharged for reasons that have nothing to do with their ability to do the business side. I can mention several. Carla Fioroni at Hewlett-Packard, an arrogant female. That one of the first things she did in this sort of family-oriented company is take down the portrait of the founder, David Packard, and put her own up. She got fired. They don't say it that way, but she did. She made speeches about herself. Some of the policies that she started are being executed. So from a business point of view, she was on the mark. From a cultural, traditional point of view, the board should never have brought in a person like that who was so an antithesis of the culture of Hewlett-Packard. And then you have a guy like Bob Nardelli of Home Depot, who grew up under Jack Welch, which is supposed to be an anointing as a sainthood, which what people don't remember that Jack Welch served the General Electric for 20 years, which is extraordinary. But in 20 years, you can change your reputation. And of at least half of that, he was known as Jack the Knife, very negative. So Nardelli shows his disdain for the shareholders by telling the board, you don't have to come to the annual meeting. And then the few that did show up, when they ask a question, he said, no, next question. Yes, next question, whatever. He got fired. He should never have been in a public company. He wasn't a nice person. Now, some of the policies that he instituted are going on. Then you have a guy like Stanley O'Neill of Merrill Lynch. Now, I don't say I'm a wizard in sociology or psychology, but when you have a CEO who belongs to 4 country clubs, avid golfer who prefers to play alone, it's like that book, Bowling Alone, you have to say to yourself, wait a minute, there's something missing here. It was a manifestation of his disdain. He picked subordinates who were subordinate. He didn't pick talent. He didn't pick people who could challenge him. Now he's out. But there was clues. Damon of Bear Stearns, who was an avid bridge player, who denied that he put bridge before the company. Where was he when they had a major crisis? He was off at a bridge tournament. I mean, these little clues, because these people don't understand the power of perceptions.
Yes, you have said that perceptions, not facts, set the public agenda.
Sure. What you believe to be true is what you think is true, and it is true to you. I mean, this where you get into the subject of broader reading. I'm a fan of Dan Yankelovich because I think he's a very, very savvy sociologist, and he's written a number of books and made a number of speeches, and all of which are totally relevant to us in the so-called PR business. He had a book on dialogue.
Yes.
And, you know, to oversimplify what he said, dialogue is an exchange between people, as we're doing. A lot of the communication that we're making comes from the body language, facial expressions, whatever. You know, but I'll bet you I could name about 10 books and you could poll the senior people in public relations, they haven't read them. Haven't read them. That's what I mean by not reading. There's a lot of junk out there because the professors who've never met a payroll have all the answers, you know. Or the CEO who writes books about how to run a company, which he didn't do it himself, or he has a ghostwriter for him. But there are books out there that are very interesting. For example, there's a not too deep a book by a guy by the name of Gary Hamel, who makes a small fortune consulting and writing, but it's called The Future of the Corporation. No, The Future of Management. And what he says, and what I liked about it, he doesn't give you a solution, he only raises the problem. Now, most writers, academics and consultants always have a magic answer, but he makes a very persuasive case that management model that we are now operating under is totally incapable of addressing the complexities of a global business environment. And he gives case after case of why that's true. And if you read it, you have to be brain dead not to challenge what you're doing yourself. And I've recommended to several CEOs, but they don't read much either. The trick to getting a CEO to read something is to get his secretary to put it in his bag when he goes on a trip. I've often said I've been married 13 times because I worked with or for directly 13 CEOs. And the people I worked on most were their secretaries, because they can make or break you.
Now, what do you think of the value of, for these individuals that you just mentioned? Corporations may have a value statement, a mission statement, a code of ethics. I mean, how valuable is that if management and the CEOs...
Not very. It's attitude over aptitude, anytime. And part of the public relations problem is that they offer solutions that are superficial. I particularly concerned about selling reputation as they do. You don't sell and you don't manufacture a reputation, you earn it. Now, there's nothing wrong with a company hiring a public relations firm to improve their reputation if the firm starts out by finding out what's wrong with it and getting management to agree to change their conduct. That's why I say attitude over aptitude. When they get public approval by media attention for ethical guidelines or any of that stuff, without actually committing themselves, I mean the CEOs, without actually committing themselves to that, they think the job is done. And you know, it's these are the things that you have to think about. Any one of those items can make or break a reputation. And you can't, I don't care how clever a writer you are, or how media savvy you are, you can't do it unless the product's there, and the product's are the people.
Right.
When you're going to ask me at some point what I'm most proud of.
Yes.
When I left Emhart, the then chairman asked me to come to a board meeting, and he said, you know, John's leaving and so forth, and if any of you have anything to say to him, do it now. And they went around like usual stuff, except the previous CEO and chairman, who was stepping down, although staying on the board, and he said, well, what I always remember was John taught me the importance of credibility. That was my weapon against the lawyers often. You can't use it too often. And the other thing I think of with some pride is the creation of a credibility index, which, when Ray Galke was president of PRSA, it was my idea. We got a grant from the PRSA Foundation and a grant from Rockefeller. I think the sum total was about $200,000 to research and create a credibility index. And one of the people on that list, Ron Hinckley, who was a superb opinion analyst, was really the person who made the idea come to fruition. We had an academic, we had 4 universities involved, several academic experts in the area. It was done so well that it was accepted by the opinion peers. And what it proved, in essence, was that people give their trust to executives depending on the issue. In some cases, they may believe the foreman in the plant more than they believe the CEO, or the mayor more than the congressman, and so on and so forth. So the idea of any universal way of building trust is not really logical. You have to tailor it to the issue and so forth. And too often in the PR field, when things really get tough, they turn to the CEO and think he's going to solve everything. Get him on the stump. Get him going on. He may be the worst person in the world to do it. There may be others who have more credibility with the shareholders or with the employees or whatever it is. I was very disappointed that they never pursued it further, let it die. They did the one thing and that's it. Oh, they did a modest follow-up on investor relations, but other than that, it's never been done. And there is one agency who has a thing they call Reputation Barometer, which is a total steal, but they don't offer any answers. They only raise questions, and that's no damn good.
Right.
I don't think. So let them stew.
And then just see if there's anything else you want to. Is there anything that you'd like to say that we haven't gone over
Whatever.
to the upcoming public relations practitioners, this next generation? What else might you want to say to them so that they could be better at what they do?
Spirit of dissatisfaction.
Okay.
you know, don't be immobilized by temporary success, small perks, fancy titles. There's always a way to do it better, and it depends on what you personally want. And if ambition is an adjective and not a noun, you're going to have to earn it. By and large, public relations business is in the corporate world. So you better immerse yourself in that. Just don't go to PR meetings, go to business meetings. Get into their mindset, into their rhythms. Talk to them. Read what they read, not what you read. If you go to one of the, like the Page meeting, I'm not going to it because I don't think those speakers they chosen have anything to say that I need to know. But nevertheless, I have never gone to a business meeting where I haven't gotten something out of it. Maybe a contact, maybe an idea. And I have gone to an awful lot. Well, I wonder why I'm going. But you have to be dissatisfied with what you're doing and your own progress. One of my friends that I've developed over the years is a man by the name of Donald Kehoe. Now, Donald Kehoe was the president and soul of Coca-Cola. He was the guy who went to the 200 and some odd countries where Coke is sold and spread the gospel. He retired at 65. And Coke went through a series of bad choices for CEOs. So in a totally unprecedented move, they reelected him to the board at 77. He's a graduate of Notre Dame. He's a garrulous storytelling Irishman, but as solid as a steel bar. And my daughter got involved in her husband's security business, and he has MS, so she was running it for a while. And I asked Don if he'd talk to her, and he graciously did. And what he said to, she still walks on water from that meeting, he said, set down your own goals, what you really think you want to do, and look at them at least every couple of months and see how you're doing. And if you cheat, you're only cheating yourself. And I kind of do that unconsciously, you know. You need that kind of discipline, and I think personal discipline is an important thing for young people. I can't tell them to be ethical or be moral because they either are or they aren't. I could give them all kinds of guidelines. That doesn't mean anything, you know. One of the cliches of the business, you put your job on the line every day. Well, I'd like to know who left because they disagreed with something. They don't put their job on the line every day. That's an old wives' tale. Now, as to, and you mentioned it in your questions, I did a research and wrote a profile of Arthur Page one time. So I think I know, although I certainly never met him, I think I got a feeling of what he was all about. And while I think the Arthur Page principles are noble, but they're a little too pious. Arthur Page was not pious. First of all, Arthur Page was not a public relations person. He was a business executive. He dealt with his peers who were also directors. He had great instinct, obviously, about the relationship of a company to its employees and to its neighbors and so on and so forth. And he articulated those, but not in those wonderfully codified terms that are in the page directory. I don't think he disagreed with any of them, and I think they're great to have. But then there's a little lacking of reality in some of them, I think, I fear. I don't, an organization has to have something like that, but they also should realize the practical side, I think. But get over the fear of writing. I don't care what you do.
Right.
If you don't do that well, and if you don't like to do it, you know, it's too bad. It's so much more important than being a virtuoso with technology. You can always hire those people. Don't you think?
Yeah.
Yeah. So, I don't know what the curriculum is at Penn State, but if you ever want a role model to look at Ball State. Do you know much about it?
No, I really don't.
They have an extraordinary communications operation. They have their own radio station. They have their own newspaper. They have their own PR firm who actually take local assignments. It's a beautiful university buried out in Muncie, Indiana. I'm very impressed by what they do in terms of what we're talking about. And I've been to other schools who are okay, but they stand out.
Yeah,
Unfortunately, they're also buried under journalism.
right. Yeah. Penn State has what you talked about. They've got PR
Well,
firms.
it's only about a couple of years now, though, isn't it?
Well, the School of Communications was organized, I think, in '85. Then it became the college in, what, '91 or '92 or something?
Mm.
And
What's the background of the dean?
journalism.
Mm.
Journalism. He comes from
Practical journalism or academic?
practical, but he was a sports writer, wasn't he? I think he was a sports writer. He's,
Oh, okay.
yeah.
His name is what, Anderson?
Right, Doug
Yeah.
Anderson. Right, he came out of Arizona State.
Out of where?
Arizona State was
Uh-huh.
where he was before he came out to Penn
Uh-huh.
State.
What was he doing in Arizona State?